Welcome. It's indisputable. I'm your host, Rashad Richey. Good to be with you. We have a lot on the agenda today. Breaking down news of the day with me, none other than the incomparable Senator Nina Turner. Always fascinating to have her analysis. Top story of the day. We knew what was happening. We knew corruption was reigning supreme inside of these facilities. Now we have the evidence. ICE detention officer guilty of sexually abusing a detainee. Here's the update.
An ICE agent in Louisiana has pled guilty to repeatedly sexually assaulting a Nicaraguan detainee in a Louisiana detention center. His name is David Corvell, and he worked in the South Louisiana ICE Processing Center. And from January through July of last year, he repeatedly sexually assaulted this woman. And the way he got away with it was by forcing her into a janitor closet. Prosecutors said Corvell forced other detainees to act as lookouts while he abused this woman. And part of the way he would coerce her into doing these things, apart from fear, was using pictures of her daughter as some kind of bargaining chip. It's absolutely vile. Now that he's pled guilty, Corvell faces up to 15 years in prison, and he will be sentenced on April 10th of this year. Some outlets have tried to paint this as some kind of romantic relationship. That implies consent. There is no consent when you are being held prisoner and a prison guard forces you in a closet and says, "Oh, I'll get you pictures of your daughter we took you away from if you have sex with me." Use your heads.
Put up the picture full mass. David Carvel, a former detention officer at the South Louisiana ICE Processing Center, pled guilty Monday, December 29th. This was a federal court in Lafayette to one count of abuse of a ward individual in federal custody. Carvel entered the guilty plea before the U.S. District Judge as part of a plea agreement with prosecutors. The charge carries a maximum sentence of up to 15 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. Even though he has pled guilty, I believe the fix is in, and I'm going to explain why in just a moment. According to court records, Carvel worked as a contract detention officer at the facility, which is operated by the GEO Group, Inc. We've talked about them on a previous show. Between January 1 and July 30th, the facility houses women and detainees at various gender identities. Prosecutors said Carvel began abusing the detainee identified by the initial CH, who was being held on an immigration matter. Between May and July, Carvel had sexual contact with the detainee multiple times while she was under his custodial and supervisory authority. According to the court documents, prosecutors said the encounters took place inside the detention center, including in a janitorial closet. He was able to plead guilty to one count. That means that the prosecutors are allowing him to plead guilty to the bare minimum of what he has done. He's not pleading guilty to the multiple times, which would be another count of the sexual abuse. The fix is in. In addition to that, we've covered this same group, the GEO group, on Indisputable. And in covering this group, we have talked about how multiple individuals have reached out to local law enforcement citing the same behavior of these contract workers who are working in these ICE detention facilities. And the local police decided to not investigate and to forward the complaint back to the private organization that has no police authority in order to internally investigate what can only be a criminal matter. The fix is in. There's more. Assistant U.S. Attorney Thomas Johnson said Carvel arranged for other detainees to act as lookouts during the encounters. That's another charge. Should be. On July 16th, the detention center staff saw Carvel and the detainee exiting a janitorial closet, prompting what? What did they do? Well, they transferred him to prompting a transfer to another housing unit. Transferred her to another housing unit. Prosecutors also allege Carvel smuggled gifts such as food, jewelry, letters, and pictures of the woman's daughter into the facility. Carvel resigned July 30th, was able to resign July 30th. Not fired, not arrested, resigned July 30th after learning investigators had obtained recordings of phone conversations between him and the detainee. During a September interview with ICE, the Office of Inspector, Carvel initially denied the relationship before later admitting it. Prosecutor said obstruction of justice. All of these are chargeable offenses, violation of oath. All of these are chargeable offenses. Why would an individual who has decided to sexually assault, sexually exploit a human being, they have trafficked illegal contraband into the facility. They have co-opted and coerced other detainees to become their lookout. That's called co-conspiracy, or perhaps something even worse. Why is this individual, who is a private contract, allowed to plead to one count of sexual assault? ICE agents arrested for crimes across the nation. Let's get to it. Investigators said one immigration enforcement official got away with physically assaulting his girlfriend for years. Another admitted he repeatedly sexually abused a woman while in his custody. A third is charged with taking bribes to remove detention officers on people targeted for deportation. At least 24 U.S. immigration and customs enforcement employees and contractors have been charged with crimes since 2020. And their documented wrongdoing includes patterns of physical abuse, patterns of sexual abuse, patterns of corruption, and other abuses of authority, such as taking bribes. A review of the Associated Press found. The Trump administration has emboldened these agents by arguing they have, quote, absolute immunity. Now, this is a lie. This is a lie, but I will explain that on the other side of this. So they believe they have absolute immunity for their actions on duty and by weakening oversight. One judge recently suggested that ICE was developing a, quote, troubling culture of lawlessness, while experts have questioned whether job applicants are getting enough vetting and training. Of course not. Quote, once a person is hired, brought on, goes through the training, and they are not the right person, it is difficult to get rid of them, and there will be a price to be paid later down the road by everyone, said Gil Kurlakowski, who served as the commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection 2014 to 2017, has been an outspoken person about this matter. So where are we? The culture is transforming. Well, that's by design. How did this happen? Once again, 80% of some of the installations of ICE, they are not lifers. These individuals are brand new. They have replaced the individuals who served in the capacity of federal agents for ICE and went through the proper training and protocol to do so. How did this happen? Why did this happen? Well, number one, they did it under the disguise of Doge. That's how it happened. That's how it happened. Why did it happen? Because that was the reason. They wanted to have a different culture. The whole dynamic of the culture is changing was intentional, not a product unintentional. It was part of the design of what they were attempting to do. Do you remember when they either gave workers who worked in intelligence and in law enforcement, federal law enforcement, you can either take this buyout or you get fired? Remember that? That was under Doge. It was to transform the culture. There's more. Almost every law enforcement agency contends with bad employees and crimes related to domestic violence and substance abuse. This is longstanding. But ICE's rapid growth and mission to deport millions are unprecedented. And the AP review found that the immense power that officers exercise over vulnerable populations can lead to abuses. Some of the most serious crimes were committed by veteran ICE employees and supervisors rather than the rookies. So you thought that was bad until you hear about this. Here it is.
A U.S. Customs and Border Protection officer is now facing federal criminal charges over allegations that he was harboring an undocumented immigrant who also happened to be his girlfriend. That is according to a new criminal complaint by the Justice Department that alleges that Andres Wilkinson, a CBP officer and supervisor, was living in Laredo, Texas with a woman who had overstayed her U.S. visa and was in the country illegally. The criminal complaint alleges that he provided her financial support, including housing, credit cards, and access to a vehicle. It even says that the two traveled together through Border Patrol checkpoints along the Texas border. The Justice Department is alleging that Wilkinson was, quote, aware of her unlawful immigration status, yet maintained a romantic relationship with her. According to the complaint, the Justice Department also collected information indicating that the woman is actually Wilkinson's niece. We contacted an attorney listed as Wilkinson's lawyer and have yet to hear back. If convicted, according to the Justice Department, Wilkinson could face up to 10 years in federal prison.
The allegation says he's sleeping with his niece. That's what the allegation says from the government. The same government that would prefer to protect individuals like this until it's just too much and it's not, well, it can't be defended. Truthfully, none of it can be. The man is sleeping with his niece, according to the report. Why? Because of the relaxed oversight, because of the pattern of not holding individuals accountable to a rule of law, because of their willingness to not only hire but retain individuals who are corrupt and have no business being ICE agents at all. Andres Wilkerson, U.S. Custom and Border Protection Supervisor, is facing federal charges over allegations he harbored an immigrant living in the country illegally, according to a news release. Court documents state the immigrant was both his girlfriend and his niece. The woman living in the country illegally was living at Wilkerson's residence in Laredo. The complaint identifies Wilkerson as the woman's boyfriend. Authorities also received research indicating the woman is the daughter of Wilkerson's brother, making her Wilkerson's niece. The woman initially entered the U.S. on a visitor visa in 2023. The complaint alleges and later overstayed authorized travel. Quote, the complaint further alleges that Wilkerson was aware of her unlawful immigration status. The release states, yet maintained a romantic relationship with her. Records show the woman had multiple entries into the U.S. until December 2023, when she began living in the U.S. with her husband at an apartment in Laredo, according to the complaint. The woman's husband petitioned for his wife's legal residence in January 2024. But the case was closed after the husband withdrew the petition in April 2025. In May 2025, the office observed Wilkerson meeting with the woman and her daughter, who was a minor, according to the complaint. From June through November 2025, law enforcement conducted surveillance at Wilkerson's residence and observed the woman living there with her daughter, according to the complaint. Investigators also noted the woman used vehicles registered to Wilkerson. Investigators detained and interviewed the woman on the 5th of February, 2026. According to the complaint, the woman told investigators she had been living with her uncle, Wilkerson, since August 2024. The woman said Wilkerson financially supported her with housing, credit cards, and assistance with financial obligations, the complaint states. The woman also said Wilkerson was aware that she was consulting with an immigration attorney to resolve her immigration status. The woman told investigators she crossed U.S. Border Patrol checkpoints in a vehicle driven by Wilkerson at least twice. The complaint also alleges the two traveled to San Antonio together, August 2025. If convicted, Wilkerson faces up to 10 years in federal prison and a fine not to exceed $250,000. The release did not state his current employment status with CBP. Harboring for the reason of exploitation and personal gain. That's what that's about. Okay? You know, there was a time in this nation many decades ago when a black person walking around like they had freedom was a crime. And individuals who had the resources and the privilege would harbor them, our allies. Harboring for the sake of personal gain and exploitation is not decent. And look at how much emphasis, how many resources the federal government dedicated to investigate this, and the lack of resources they will utilize to investigate a murder when one of their own do it. All right. Senator thoughts.
I mean, it's just some sick stuff, Doc. All of the cases are sick. This last one in particular.
Yeah.
You know, the man, was he aware that this was his niece, or he acted
Yes.
like he was oblivious to the fact?
He was aware.
But just did not care. You know, when you were talking, I wrote down culture, consciousness, and corruption. the culture, the consciousness, and the corruption that is flowing through ICE and Border Patrol right now being exaggerated, exacerbated by the Trump administration, and the way that these officers are allowed, and in some ways, Doc, encouraged to comport themselves. Because if you're not going to change it, you encouraging this behavior. You're saying that this behavior is okay. And that is a problem. And when you have a judge that states developing a troubling culture of violence, I mean, it's beyond developing as far as I'm concerned. They already have, and the judge is right, don't get me wrong, but they have established a troubling culture of violence and exploitation that must be addressed. And it doesn't seem like it's going to be addressed in this administration. So the next administration needs to be in the ready. They're going to have a whole bunch of stuff to clean up. But this is insane. And anybody that believes in the rule of law, because that's the other side, they say that ad nauseum. Anybody that believes in the rule of law should look at this kind of behavior and say that it is unbecoming and it is unacceptable and not with our tax dollars.
Very well said. Very well said. We will bring updates as they come. Obviously, there's more to document. Okay, well, Stephen A. Smith, he says, racism, you all are making a big deal about it, not that big a deal. And you don't need less police, you need more police. Here it is.
Do you worry about racism if he ran for president?
No. I know it exists. I know that you can't escape it, but I do not believe it is as prevalent as some on the left would like us to believe. I do believe a vast majority of Americans judge you on the content of your individual character rather than the color of your skin. I think a lot of people in America, especially in this day and age, now more so than ever before, it's not about race. It's about the fact that they don't give a damn about it because they got their own problems. That's entirely different than believing they are superior to you and they want to hold you back from ascending. That's not what's going on to the degree that it was decades ago. What's going on now is that we have more white Americans and others suffering and worried about the state of our nation. And because they're concerned about that, that's where their worries lie.
Well, that bank account talking, ain't it? Stephen A., I got something for you, sir. But before I go to it, he also said we need more cops on the street. Here it is.
Make no mistake about it. We wouldn't have a border crisis under my watch. Hell no. We wouldn't have this crime that exists in the streets of New York. You wouldn't hear about me saying defund the police. We ain't defunding any police. I'm calling 911 when there's a problem. I know you're calling 911 when there's a problem. I'll be damned if I'm going to have less police officers out there. There's going to be more. That's me. I would focus on a flourishing economy and making sure we did everything we could, because I believe when you have something to lose, you know how to behave. When you have something to lose, you know how to behave. If you have nothing to lose. And as a result, you're willing to tear down anything, even if it's America.
Sir, this is not a sports play. Put him up full mass. All this simple ass logic, ABC elementary, back and forth. Let me be very clear with you, sir. Number one, the issue of racism is not about personal racism. It is about the entrenched racism that is institutional. That's the racism we're talking about. I cannot stop, and nor do I want to stop a bigot from talking about racism during their dinner time in their home. That is their prerogative. That is not the racism we are referring to. We are referring to the institutional racism, because the very question to you, Stephen A., about do you worry about race came from a white reporter due to his own institutional racism. Because if a white male was there who happened to be connected to the Republican Party, that question wouldn't be, sir, are you concerned about white racist? No, they don't get that question because it is not entrenched or institutional in them. Racism is not about racism. It is about the ism, sir. Not so much about the race. What is the ism? The ism is the separation. The ism is the part that says we judge the race. That's the part, the social construct inside of the minds of individuals who believe that the epidermis or the color of your skin makes you inferior is the issue. That collective bias has led to structural discrimination. For example, Donald Trump decides to gut the Department of Education. The Department of Education happens to be the only federal agency where black folk are overrepresented. These are highly educated black men and women, in particular women. Gut the Department of Education, creating a massive job loss crisis in the black community of those who decided to engage in significant educational attainment. For what reason? Why did they engage in educational attainment? In order to have job security. And Trump took that away with gutting that office. Black people are making less under this administration. Household median income has dropped under this administration. Home ownership has dropped under this administration for black folk. And you don't think structural racism is part of that. We're not talking about your personal belief. We're talking about the statistics, the data that you can reverse engineer in order to find the genesis of it. Second, put this picture back up, Jordan. When you said, sir, that when something happens, you're going to call 911, who doesn't call 911 if they need 911? But 911 has also created worse outcomes than if they never called 911 in the first place. 911 is not about policing. The issue, sir, and I really do hope that as you journey, you start reading and you start being open to the reality that you don't know what the hell you're talking about because you're leading people to hell with this ideology. Policing isn't about public safety. Public safety is about public safety. Policing responds when public safety hasn't happened. Police respond when public safety hasn't happened. The goal, sir, is public safety. There are many ways to get to the space of public safety without policing. As a matter of fact, if your county or city or state has to hire more police, they're telling you they're failing. Because that means they have not addressed the issues of public safety. I would prefer to have a robust mentoring program for young at-risk youth between the ages of 12 to 17 that would stop the potential of criminality rather than putting all of my money into reacting to criminality at the age of 18. You see, that's called a public safety model. I would prefer a model that actually engages in rehabilitation, second chance opportunities, education. The greatest deterrent to recidivism is if a person learns something while they are incarcerated. That can be a skill, a trade, that can be a college degree. It is, by statistics, the greatest deterrent to any crime in the future is if you train that individual to make money. And third, I will say this, sir. You're smarter than that, Stephen A. You're smarter than this ABC ideology. Policing has never solved a socioeconomic issue. You have made the argument that crime is related to economics. When have police ever been able to arrest themselves out of socioeconomic dysfunction? Never. Because if you could arrest yourself out of socioeconomic dysfunction, Chicago would be the richest city in the United States of America. New York will be the most crime-free and richest progressive place on the planet Earth. You cannot hire more cops to solve a socioeconomic dysfunction. All right, that's my 2 cents, sir. So Smith took issue with Biden's border policy. Quote, the borders needed to be closed. Doesn't quite work like that. Trump was right to do that, he said, but only because Biden opened them. Had Biden followed Barack Obama's method and his plan of what he did in deporting even more people than Trump did in his first term, you wouldn't hear me saying that, end quote, Smith said. Another quote, but when you let anywhere from 12 to 15 million people cross the border, that's a talking point, by the way, That's not a confirmed number. 12 to 15 million people across the border illegally, swearing in our face, spitting in our face while and telling us it's raining, figuratively speaking, by telling us there was no border crisis when clearly there was. Emergency efforts were necessary, end quote. And put his picture back up. What makes it a border crisis? What makes it a border crisis? What happened to the caravan? What happened to the gangsters? You do know they ship cocaine on boats and planes, sir. What made it a border crisis? Undocumented immigrants are the least likely demographic in America to offend criminally. That is a fact. What made it a border crisis? Because somebody said it? Because of the numbers that they're telling you that are unconfirmed? What made it a border crisis? The caravans of gangsters and child predators? No. That's in the White House, sir. What made it a border crisis? Is it financial? Because according to all financial reports, undocumented labor in the United States of America leads to an economic plus, not an economic negative. What made it a border crisis? All right. Quote, now, he says, do I like what I'm seeing in the streets of America in terms of ICE grabbing people up, snatching people off the streets, detaining folks? No, I do not. Smith said, do I like them saying, hey, we're going after the criminals, and come to find out your definition of criminals is anybody who crossed the border illegally or opposed to the impression you gave us that there were real bona fide criminals that was doing harm to American citizens? No, I don't like that either. Now, put his picture back up. I want you to understand the difference in how he answered that question and how he went in on everything else. So when it came to policies that adversely stood against Trump, his response is, do I like this? No. Did I want this? No. Did I prefer this? No. But when it comes to black folk, racism, and everything else, he had an exacting design for his point of view. Exacting. But when it came to Trump, well, do I like what Trump is doing? No. Starting to sound like MAGA, sir. You're starting to sound like MAGA. Because that's the same contextualization they typically utilize when it comes to Trump and his cronies crossing a line, crossing another line, and now crossing this line. Quote, I will confess to you, I'm giving strong consideration to being on that debate stage for 2027, Smith told Costa. Quote, I've got this year coming up, 2026, to think about it, to study, and to know the issues. And sir, I highly recommend you do some more studying. Senator, thoughts here?
Doc, you took the words right out of my mouth. I want him to study quick. He talks too much to be this wrong.
Yeah.
So he definitely has to study. And for any American, but especially a black man, not to understand the difference between individual bigotry and discrimination compared to institutional or systemic racism, it's quite stunning that he has reached this far in his career and he doesn't understand the global impact and nature of systemic or also called institutional racism in the United States of America. And if we start looking at the diaspora, I mean, within the diaspora, the entire diaspora where Black people are, has been impacted by white supremacy, racism that impacts one's ability. We're not talking about individual. So Dr. Richard, you are absolutely right. If somebody wants to be a bigot at their kitchen table, they can be a bigot at the kitchen table. But when a group of bigots control whether or not you can bank somewhere, whether or not you can eat at a restaurant, whether or not you can keep your job, whether or not your economic status hits a ceiling, it never can go above that. whether or not there's generational poverty, not one or two people who got it wrong, but just generationally, there's a cycle. Where you go to school, do you pay taxes in a neighborhood, schools you can't go to? Can you go into a hospital? That is systemic and institutional racism that this man is not grasping. And you know what? His answer is really not much different than that of Vice President Harris. She was asked, it was a few years ago, Doc, it was after one of the State of the Union, she was asked, was there racism still in the country? And she said no. I mean, and also Senator Tim Scott said the same thing. I was gobsmacked. But that kind of mentality, who are you catering to, sir? Just tell the truth. And he did not list one material policy that he would implement other than increasing the police that would really change the material conditions of the people in this country, like universal health care or increasing the federal minimum wage. And you are absolutely right, Dr. Ritchie. People need to understand this. Police respond to symptoms. It is not the job of law enforcement to deal with social economic crises or problems or failings. By the time you call in the police in, 9 times out of 10, unless it is a crime in action, they responded to something that already happened.
That's right.
And it is a failure. So please, Stephen A. Smith, stop getting high off your own supply. Okay? You do need to study before you get on anybody's stage to try to debate policy and whether or not you're going to become president of the United States of America. He in it for the theater at this point, Doc. That's what I'm thinking. He think he gonna yell his way like he do on his shows. He gonna yell his way on the stage. That's what he thinks he's gonna do.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we live in an era where that is possible. He can yell his way on the stage, and that's why I believe it's up to us to continue to give our brother light, which is truth and good information, so that he can at least have an opportunity to grow, to expand into the role as he journeys, hopefully. All right, we got more on the other side. Indisputable, stick and stay.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapore here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs, and then he extends an offer to join his elite sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he soon realizes that he's not the only Black salesperson there. He's the only Black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to make it to the top. And once there, he has status, money, power, but he says, you know what? I don't like being the token Black guy. So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace. This book definitely, if you couldn't tell, touches on many things that are relevant to this moment that we're all living in right now, but it's also connected to the many moments in history that have come before today. I hope that you read it. I hope that you enjoy it. And if you want to order a copy, go to shoptyt.com. Thank you. Be well. Happy 2021.
Here's the inside scoop on diners in LA. You want good pastrami sandwich, you go to Factors. You want to see some people in the business, you go to Nate and Al's. You want the best variety? My secret spot's the Nosh. Now here's the inside scoop on politics and news. You go watch the Young Turks live every day at 6 o'clock Eastern.
All right. Welcome back. Always good to be with you. We got a lot of comments. I'll read as many as I can. Brett Campbell, aka Dragging My Ass. 15 years isn't the right amount of a full sentence for the brute's crime. It's a sentence fragment. That is correct. That's what I believe as well. Purple Rain Dragon, talking about Stephen A. That clown is confusing his wealth privilege with the state of the country. Incorrect, Stephen. Yeah. And that's why typically if you run for office, you want to listen to people. You want to listen to people so you will know what they are experiencing. If you run for office and you neglect or you decide to dismiss the collective experience of an entire demographic of people, and those people happen to be your same color, you have an issue. You got a problem. All right. Ronald Fan -R3Z. Happy Hump Day, Indisputable fans. And to you, Doc and Neen, I hope you guys are doing awesome. And you, Doc, look so sharp and handsome than Lindsey Graham. I take that as a compliment. I absolutely do. Thank you for that. Burn to the Kiwi Dragon 4382. Bargaining, no ransom. There you go. And Republicrat 327. You know who's going to try to pardon him. Snack Panther. Stephen A. going to crash out and end up doing TYT Sports. Oh, oh man. That was funny. I'm going to say, Jordan, let's save that one. Let's send that to the crew. That was a good one. That was a good one. Okay. And Dr. Squiddy's rapid replacement of people in charge of law enforcement and leadership positions is a clear and deliberate action by Trump to ensure his brutality and authority are solidified. That's right. He's using DHS and ICE as his personal militia. Right. And I believe that's what all of Doge was about. I believe Doge was only about that. And everything else was just a fake out. Okay. All right. Here we go. A black panelist slams MAGA pundits defending a slavery exit removal. Here it is.
Yeah, I don't think we should erase history. To Kevin's point, we can't erase history. And those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. So obviously we need to acknowledge that this was a shameful chapter in American history. And I think, I don't know anybody who doesn't want to acknowledge that and acknowledge that that was a terrible, horrible chapter. I think it's interesting, though. I look at universities and some of these people are so educated and they don't have a love for America. And so I think I would love to see, in addition to acknowledging terrible moments in history, I'd also love to see the fact celebrated that America is really the only civilization that's ended slavery. And so I think we need to have both elements there.
Do you think I love America?
I'm sure you do.
No, I mean, do you? As a military veteran,
Of course.
I'm a veteran, do you think I love America?
Of
And
course.
do you also think that erasing what actually happened to my ancestors that actually fought for this
I
country
don't think
when they
it should
couldn't
be
even sit at land?
erased.
But it's not just about trying to erase it. It's about actually acknowledging and doing something about it. It's one thing for me to acknowledge something, and there's something else to sit here and act like there's nothing that needs to be corrected.
Let me give you the scene here, okay? So, political consultant Ms. Figueroa is setting the record straight on CNN over Trump's removal of the slavery exhibit we talked about on this show, okay? So they're having a panel discussion. You have a New York Post correspondent who decides to make an interesting claim. And the claim is that we should focus on Americans' role in ending slavery or enslavement of Black people rather than focusing on the other stuff. Okay? And so Ms. Figueroa spoke up. And then she had to give Kevin O'Leary some of this too, because, well, he said Americans have freedoms that they wouldn't have in China. Here it is.
This lovely gentleman sat right here and tried to erase it, literally sitting next to me, literally. So even doing the comparison, saying, would you rather go to China or not go to China? Are you a veteran? So that means you never raised the pause means no. So that means he never raised his
Wait a
hand to say,
second.
I'm willing to die for this country. Let's stop talking about just the Dow. Not only was I willing to die for this country, both of my grandparents
Thank you
were.
for your service.
That's right. Thank me for my service. So how dare he
I
sit here
thank
and
you for
ask
your
me?
service.
So how dare
And
he
I-
sit here and
I feel
ask me
proud
would
that
I
you're
rather
able
be
to
in China
raise
when
these
I was willing to
topics.
die for the country that is locking up the people that we're talking about. There are more black men enslaved than those who were enslaved in 1850 in the prison system right now in 1850 that did not actually get the due process that you guys are talking about, that actually had to take plea bargains because they could not afford adequate law attorneys, which is why I'm in law school, by the way, right now. Shout out to FAMU. So to sit here and ask me, what country do I live
Let me
in?
point
It's
something
called
out to
America.
you.
You can't point
Okay.
nothing out.
I do.
That's
I
what
want
you
to
keep
say
getting
this.
confused.
If you were
He ain't ready. So put it up full mask. Okay, so his point was basically you got more rights than China does, that China would give you. And her point is, yeah, that's the reason why we fought, and she personally fought to make sure that freedoms abound in the United States. So her point was that, correct, you're right, this is America. And people like her fought to protect and enhance those freedoms in America, not for China, but for America. Okay? It's a ridiculous argument to submit that you have more rights than whatever other country you may put on the table. It's insane. So this is the exhibit that was dismantled. We showed you this on a prior episode of the show. It was a week before Black History Month. It came in response to Trump's executive order called Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History is the name of the executive order. Exhibits are not allowed to, quote, inappropriately disparage Americans past or Americans who are living. Really? Sir, you disparage Americans who are dead and alive every week. A reminder of its contents. The outdoor exhibit called Freedom and Slavery in the Making of a New Nation memorialized 9 people enslaved by George Washington at the president's site, where the first president once lived. The exhibit examines the paradox between slavery and freedom in the founding of the nation, according to a description of the Park Service website. It is a de facto erasure of history. That the DNA of this nation, even inside of those men celebrated as founding fathers or those men celebrated as statesmen, that those individuals, the paradox is, they also engaged in this evil called slavery. See, the truth is the only thing that has set you free. Free from what? Well, first, freedom from the illusion. Freedom from the illusion. Freedom from the illusion. Now, once you are free from the illusion, you have to become determined to live independent of the illusion of others that they will attempt to manipulate you with. There are some who would prefer to live in an illusion. And there are others who would prefer to live outside of an illusion and be willing to engage in equitable ventures. You see, they are afraid of equality. It is not Black folk who are afraid of equality. It is not Black folk who are afraid of equitable remedies. We're not afraid of it. We actually would prefer things just to be fair, not to be unequal in our favor. We prefer fairness. Anytime Black folk talk amongst each other, you know what we talk about? We talk about fairness. We talk about fairness. We don't talk about having more than or having a leg up. We just want things to be fair. When they get in their rooms, they close those doors, they create policies that create unfairness to others and gives them leverage. They don't talk about fairness. There's more. A U.S. judge, Cynthia ruled Monday that the materials must be restored. We were hoping that this ruling would come in favor of restoring, must be restored in their original condition while the lawsuit challenging the removal's legality plays out. She prohibited Trump officials from installing replacements that explain the history differently. She wrote, quote, as if the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984 now existed, with this motto, quote, ignorance is strength. This court is now asked to determine whether the federal government has the power it claims to dissemble and disassemble historical truths when it has some domain over historical facts. It does not, the judge said. The Trump administration did respond. The Department of Interior and National Park Service said in a statement Tuesday that the agencies, quote, disagree with the court ruling and plans to appeal. Quote, the National Park Service routinely updates exhibits across the park system to ensure historical accuracy and completeness. The statement said, quote, if not for this unnecessary judicial intervention, updated interpretive materials providing a fuller account of the history of slavery at Independence Hall would have been installed in the coming days. They're telling you, oh, the judge won't let us rewrite history. Whitewash it, no pun intended. Senator, thoughts here?
First of all, Figaro did that. So shout out to Figaro.
Right.
That's what I call her. Figaro and I know one another, was on the Sanders campaign together. Even before that, we've been together. So Figaro did that. She handled that. I'm glad to see it. It is truly stunning. But we're accustomed to it. But it's sad that we've become accustomed to these well-dressed, well-meaning white folks that were sitting around the table at CNN on Abby's show, just seeming so sincere about what they were saying in their ignorance. I recommend a book to them, and it's called How to Be Less Stupid on Race by Dr. Crystal Fleming. Hope I didn't jack up that title. But I'm telling you, Doc, it's just ridiculous that Black people are the only group who are asked to, just forget about it. Oh, it was so long ago. And it would be one thing. This is not just about the enslavement of our ancestors. It would be different if it was just about that. It's not just about that. It is about every other thing that has happened after that. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And as someone who was a history professor at a community college, we talked about it all. You know, when that lady said, I wish they would tell other stories. What other stories you want us to tell? We're telling the whole of history. It's just that particular part of America's history you don't want to hear. And for her to say that America is the only, what did she say? The only civilized nation to end slavery? She needs to take a few courses because that is an absolute lie. Now, back to the judge. Thank God that the judge was right in telling the Trump administration, you just can't sub in stuff that you want to sub in. And there's no surprise that they are appealing what the judge had to say. Like they are trying to whitewash history. They are trying to take out the parts that they don't want to deal with, and they don't want other people to learn about it either. And that really is quite a shame. Even the Medgar Evers exhibit, they took that down because they didn't want the guy that killed Medgar Evers to be named as a KKK member and a racist, a segregationalist. That was just too much for them. You know, it's stunning how this administration is spending so much time. They want to talk about Black people on race. They are spending so much time on race. Right. I can't even understand what is the fascination with it. I mean, this is some sick stuff, Doc. Instead of doing things that would change the lives of people in this country, they're the ones that are spending an inordinate amount of time on race. And your point about what Black people talk about, you know, somebody once said this country should be glad that Black people want justice and not revenge. If you look at the patterns of Black people post-enslavement, building schools, trying to find family members, you know, churches, it was about love and community, building community when they had every right if they wanted to say that this nation has inflicted this horror on us. And so we about to go stone cold crazy up in this piece. They could have did that and they would have every right to. But Black people as a whole have never did that or said that about the United States of America.
That's right. And Senator, I believe the reason why they are doing this is because they plan, which it won't happen, but in their mind, they plan to do it again. And here's what I mean. If you don't want someone to know how you're going to rob them, you start eliminating the details of how you robbed them the last time. So they never see it coming. And that's their plan. It won't work, but that's the ideological shift that they're trying to create in order to have the prerequisite required to dupe people again. Just my 2 cents. Okay. All right. I got something for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish a Karen would.
You want to call the police on them for having a barbecue on a Sunday.
You're still free! Back off!
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
I speak English, I speak Spanish.
What is your problem? Right, America, English.
You guys.
I was born and raised here too, and I always speak with English.
I'm bilingual, so I speak Spanish and I speak English. What other language you speak?
English is the capital of America.
I don't care.
Not
I don't care.
Mexico.
No Mexico. I'm
We're
from
not-
Cuba. I'm from Puerto Rico.
We're not
I
from
go back to
Mexico.
Puerto Rico.
See? We pay taxes here, man. What are you talking about?
You pay taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you still our money to pay taxes.
Hell no. I work. I have 2 jobs. So what are you talking about?
Why? Put it up full mass. Ma'am? Come on, ma'am. Somebody got to love you. This is an opportunity for correction here. According to the report, a race of MAGA Karen gets kicked out of Pizza Hut. Man, what are we doing? What are we doing? Thankfully, the employees refused to serve her after her behavior was brought to their attention. Big ups to the employees. They never deserve to have that kind of treatment around them. And they did the right thing when it was brought to their attention. The people who were there just trying to get some pizza never should have had that behavior around them. And I'm glad the employees did the right thing and they were empowered to do the right thing. You know what's ironic? When I was a freshman in college, I worked at Pizza Hut. And this was during the days when Pizza Hut was a full service food establishment. My daughter has no point of reference for what I'm about to tell you. But if you are of a certain age, you remember Pizza Hut sold beer, wine. You could sit down. They had a salad bar. You can have an all-you-can-eat pizza situation at 12 noon. So I worked at a Pizza Hut. And I started working in the kitchen. And one day, one of the waitresses, she quit. The waitress quit in the middle of rush hour. It was during about 12:30. The manager says, his name is Dave. Dave comes, he says, hey, man, can you take that apron off and go finish waiting these tables? And I did, and I enjoyed it. And so I worked at a Pizza Hut for about a year while I was a freshman in college. And it is the hardest job on the planet Earth, okay? From prepping the pizza to making sure you have all of your fixings right. And back then, Pizza Hut was doing multiple new things every week. There was a new deal, a new kind of pizza, new kind of crust. So big ups to the Pizza Hut employees. I know it's not an easy job. All right, I've been there. Okay, Senator, thoughts here.
Well, thanks for sharing that experience, Doc. I worked at Burger King, okay? And rallies too on the way up. So we got some street cred. Yeah, these jobs are hard and intense. You know, the brothers want to start a conversation like that when you walk into the pizza place. Right. That's what's baffling me right now. Like, how did this start? I mean, you have to be some type of miserable to walk into a restaurant and look at people and try to identify their heritage and then start in on them. Lady, just get your pizza and go. And if you don't like what you see at the pizza place, then go to another pizza place. But to do that, you know, I am very confused as to how. But you know what? Karens always find a way. They will find a way.
Yeah.
Even ruin pizza night.
Pizza night of all nights. Okay. All right. We got more on the other side. It's indisputable. Stick and stay.
Hey everyone, Mateo Scarapo here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs, and then he extends an offer to join his elite sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he soon realizes that he's not the only Black salesperson there. He's the only Black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to make it to the top. And once there, he has status, money, power, but he says, you know what? I don't like being the token Black guy. So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace. This book definitely, if you couldn't tell, touches on many things that are relevant to this moment that we're all living in right now, but it's also connected to the many moments in history that have come before today. I hope that you read it. I hope that you enjoy it. And if you want to order a copy, go to shoptyt.com. Thank you, be well, and happy 2021.
Here's the inside scoop on diners in LA. You want good pastrami sandwich, you go to Factors. You want to see some people in the business, you go to Nate and Al's. You want the best variety? My secret spot's the Nosh. Now here's the inside scoop on politics and news. You go watch the Young Turks live every day at 6 o'clock Eastern.
All right, welcome back. Always good to be with you. Okay, I may be coming to a city near you. Put it up full mass. Me and my big homie Ben Crump, all right? So we're doing a college tour together, a national panel discussion. We're talking about bail reform and mental health coming up at Bowie State University. That will be on the 23rd of February. That's at 4:30 p.m. We'd love to see you there if you're around. The next day, we're headed to Coppin State University, Baltimore. That will begin at 9 a.m. on the 24th, okay? So if you're around, we'd love to see you. Talk to you, hug your neck, take a picture, chop it up, all right? And big ups to my good friend, Ben Crump. Okay. Well, Noem, the person in charge of Homeland Security, decided to call off the Coast Guard from searching for missing guardsmen. Here it is.
Kristi Noem left an active duty service member to die in the middle of the ocean, all because she didn't want one of the planes used for deportation flights to be wasted on a search and rescue mission for the service member. I wish I were kidding. Thanks to reporting in the New Republic today, we now know that in February of 2025, after Seaman Brian K. Lee fell overboard the ship he was serving on, Kristi Noem personally intervened to ensure that no resources that she wanted focused on deportations would be even temporarily redirected towards saving the service member's life, or even just recovering his body so that his family could lay him to rest. According to 2 US officials and 1 Coast Guard official, Noem personally called the Coast Guard's acting commandant, Admiral Kevin Lunday, to order him to pull the C-130 plane off of the search and rescue mission and return it to alien expulsion operations, transporting immigrants from California to a detention center in Texas. So I guess you can now add dead service members to the very long and yet still somehow growing list of reasons that none of this has ever been about keeping Americans safe.
None of it. Put it up full mass. Oh, she likes that. She gets saluted. They have to do what she says, and she makes ridiculous decisions that shows her negligence and her lack of honor. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's relationship with U.S. Coast Guard officials has become strained throughout her first year leading the department, according to 2 U.S. officials, a Coast Guard official and a former Coast Guard official. The tensions between Noem and the only branch of the U.S. military overseen by DHS stem from some early decisions she made that upset Coast Guard officials, including a verbal directive to shift Coast Guard resources from a search and rescue mission to find a missing service member, the sources said. The tension between some Coast Guard officials and Noem began after 23-year-old Coast Guardsman went overboard. A 23-year-old went overboard into the Pacific Ocean. This was on the 4th of February last year, shortly after the Senate confirmed Noem into her role, according to the 2 U.S. officials. The Coast Guard official and the former Coast Guard official. The Coast Guard said the Coast Guard had surged, ships and aircraft to the Pacific to find the guardsmen. Hours into the search, Noem learned that a Coast Guard C-130 that was supposed to fly detained migrants from California to Texas was among the aircraft over the Pacific looking for the missing, struggling, fighting for his life guardsman. And she intervened, according to the 2 U.S. officials and the Coast Guard official. Noem verbally instructed the acting commandant of the Coast Guard, you have Admiral Kevin Lundy, pull the plane. So damn sad. Pull the plane off the search and rescue mission so it would not miss the immigrant flight as part of the DHS so-called alien expulsion operations, according to the U.S. officials and the Coast Guard official. Lundy notified the National Command Center, which ordered the C-130 to fly to San Diego, while other aircraft and ships involved in the search continued, according to one U.S. official and the current Coast Guard official. In an effort to keep the C-130 searching for the missing service member, the Regional Coast Guard Command in San Diego scrambled to find 2 available C-27s that could fly the detained people to Texas, which freed up the C-130 to continue searching for the missing guardsmen after about an hour. The 2 U.S. officials and the Coast Guard official said the search ultimately went on for 190 hours, covering 19,000 square miles. But the guardsman was never found. It's not clear that Noem's directive to pull the C-130 had any impact on the search, particularly given the Coast Guard found alternative aircraft that allowed it to return to the effort at hand. One, it possibly could have, given the time delay that it did create, it possibly could have had an impact. But the bigger impact is this. That's her management style. That's the bigger impact, that she would choose to make a decision that would harm another service member than help them. That is the issue. There's more. DHS spokesperson said C-130 was shifted from immigration flights to the search and rescue operation in the Pacific and continued on that mission until the search was suspended. The spokesperson said the C-130 never left the search and that there's no documentation it was diverted away from the search and rescue operation. Despite the differing narratives, the incident left Coast Guard officials with a negative impression of Noem, according to the 2 U.S. officials, the Coast Guard official and the former Coast Guard official. The incident reflected a clash of cultures between Noem's leadership style and the Coast Guard officials, the sources said. Quote, the primary mission was search and rescue, the former Coast Guard official said, and now the number 1 stated mission of the Coast Guard is border security. That is a cultural change that the culture hasn't quite caught up to, end quote. Coast Guard officials have privately raised concerns that with one another and confided in former officials about some of Noem's directives and use of Coast Guard resources to service her and the administration's priorities. The current and former Coast Guard officials said, quote, that under Noem's leadership, more than 750 Coast Guard flights have been redirected from regular missions such as maritime patrols and search and rescue efforts to instead to fly detained immigrants to deportation hubs, according to ICE Flight Monitor. Coast Guard flights carrying immigrants jumped last year from 14 in June to 149 in November, according to the group. At times, the tensions have escalated into confrontations. In one contentious incident in May, Noem's top advisor, Corey Lewandowski, berated Coast Guard flight staff and threatened to fire them for taking off without one of the secretary's personal items on board, a blanket. Not any blanket, a heated blanket. Yes, a heated blanket, according to the current and former Coast Guard officials. The official added that under Noem's leadership, quote, you never know what's going to happen, end quote, and that morale at Coast Guard headquarters is terrible. A spokesperson for DHS denied that there was guidance to Coast Guard Air Station Sacramento that prioritized transporting immigrants first over search and rescue operation. We know that line. Quote, that's ridiculous. No such guidance was ordered, end quote, the spokesperson said in an email statement. Quote, the Coast Guard is always ready to respond to search and rescue missions, and it carefully balances all operations and mission requirements, end quote. The spokesperson said in the response to this story, quote, the entire premise of your story is incorrect, and these attacks are nothing more than a politicized deep state effort to undermine President Trump's immigration enforcement agenda and distract from the historic success. No, I think they cared about the service member who's dead. I think that was the reason they got upset and said something, not because of anything else you've said. Senator, thoughts here?
I mean, this is comical if it wasn't so sad. You got a 23-year-old Coast Guardsman overboard, and this woman cares about deploying yet another another plane over there for immigration stuff. But the 1,000 you got is not enough. You got to have 1,001.
Yeah.
And the sad thing about this is that anybody that buys into the fact that what President Donald J. Trump is doing is helping their families in any way, I got something I can sell you, a bridge I can sell you. It is not. It is a distraction. And you want to talk about being unpatriotic? Kristi Noem and her directive was unpatriotic.
That's right.
Not caring about the parents and the other family members of this 23-year-old to send one more vehicle over for some immigration stuff. This kind of mentality is actually sick, because anybody that believes that this puts one more plate of food on your table, one more gallon of gas in your car, helps you to elevate in whatever company that you're working at, helps your child get a better education. Even if you believe that people who come to this country illegally, right? I mean, we do have a right to have borders, sovereign nation, all of that stuff, all the rules. I get it. I'm not saying that we don't. But the way in which they doing it, so Americans get shot in the head, children get victimized at school, they roughing up people, overrunning the Constitution. Does that make us any safer? Does that make any American wealthier, happier to pursue life, liberty, and happiness? This kind of sickness that they're setting up and how people are now being programmed to think that this is okay, it's really something wrong with us. And definitely Kristi Noem is over the top in this. And Democrats, if they regain power, they need to put a check on this kind of stuff. Not slowly, not in a bipartisan way, a total check. Because I bet you, Doc, if we go and ask anybody who voted for President Trump, did you vote for Kristi Noem to be saluted and worshiped? Did you vote for Kristi Noem to take away from a search and rescue of a 23-year-old service member? I bet you they would say no. They would probably say, I didn't know that she was doing that. They didn't vote for all of this stuff. That's their fallback position. Y'all trying to stop his immigration policy, or you don't want to support what the president is doing. That's always their fallback position. Well, what really is the president doing to change the material conditions of working class people in this country? I want somebody to answer that question. And is the roughing up of people in the vile way that they are doing, is that in any way edifying our quality of life as Americans?
That's right. Well said. Simple question. Are you doing better today or worse today with President Trump at the helm? All right. We'll bring updates as they develop. Okay. 3 patients are dead because a surgeon faked their medical records. That is the report. Put it up full mass. Damn shame. John Stevenson Bynum Jr., a Houston doctor, has been indicted on charges of falsifying medical records for 5 patients, making them ineligible to receive a liver transplant that they needed. Federal prosecutors announced this month. 3 patients have already died as a result of this falsification. So Dr. Bynum was indicted by a grand jury in Houston last month on 5 counts of false statements relating to healthcare matters. Bynum is accused of making false statements in his role as director of abdominal organ transplantation and surgical director for liver transplantation at Memorial Hermann Health System in Houston. The indictment alleges Bynum changed the records of 5 patients from March 2023 to March 2024. One patient was ineligible to receive a donor organ offer for approximately 149 days because of this change and died in 2024 under Dr. Bynum's care. That's according to the indictment. Another patient became ineligible to receive a donor organ offer for approximately 69 days and died December 2023 during a surgery to receive a new liver. A third patient who required an urgent liver transplantation died December 2023, 2 days after Biden allegedly entered false donor matching criteria for the patient that severely restricted or made the patient functionally ineligible to receive a life-saving donor organ offer. That's according to the indictment. 2 other patients received successful liver transplants after going to other hospitals and getting a second opinion. Always get a second opinion. Patients, their families, and other members of their medical care team were unaware that the doctor allegedly made false statements in their medical records according to court documents. Quote, Dr. Biden is alleged to have betrayed the most sacred duty of a medical professional to heal. That's what the U.S. attorney said in a statement. Quote, he stole years and hope from those who trusted him most by falsifying records and preventing patients from receiving organ transplants. The family of several patients who died while waiting for liver transplants have sued Biden in Houston civil court, wanting to know if their loved ones were denied liver transplants due to Biden's actions. The lawsuits remain pending. I expect more to come out of that. Sammy Khalil, Dr. Biden's attorney, told reporters outside the federal courthouse after the doctor's initial court appearance Thursday afternoon that the doctor is a talented organ transplant surgeon who has performed over 2,000 transplants over his 40-year career. Quote, nothing he did was unlawful. Everything that he did was lawful and in good faith, Khalil said. Quote, we look forward to clearing his name in a court of law and educating, frankly, the government on the medical concepts that undergird this totally misguided prosecution. The indictment and a news release by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Houston did not detail a motive for Dr. Biden's alleged action. Angela Dodge, a spokeswoman for the U.S. Attorney's Office, declined to comment. Memorial Hermann Health System and UT Health Houston, which employs Biden, did not immediately respond to emails requesting comment. You have exacting cause and effect. So according to the allegation, the reason why these individuals were not eligible for the transplant, some of them needed an emergency transplant or they were going to die within days, is because the way the doctor filed the information, falsifying the record or making untrue claims about the medical record, made them ineligible to receive the transplant. You can argue motive. Motive is a factor. But even if the defense says it was done by negligence, that's criminal negligence, in my opinion, all day. If it was done because there's a pattern or because there was some other leverage that the doctor used or was benefiting from, now you have an aggravated motive. But you still do not dismiss the simple cause and effect. All right, Senator, thoughts here?
Yeah, Doc, this is really sad. And we know stories like this come up from time to time. Rare, thank the Lord, but they're not new.
Right.
And I hope to God that they're not others. You know, it's bad enough that it's this many, but I hope that they're not others, because certainly when you find out information like this, it appears to be a pattern. So just really hoping that the families get justice. And if, you know, this doctor, I mean, what was going through his mind and why would he comport himself like this? This is really sad.
Very sad. We'll bring updates as they develop. We got more on the other side. Indisputable, stick and stay.
Hey everyone, Mateo Scarapo here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs, and then he extends an offer to join his elite sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he soon realizes that he's not the only Black salesperson there. He's the only Black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to make it to the top. And once there, he has status, money, power, but he says, you know what? I don't like being the token Black guy. So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace. This book definitely, if you couldn't tell, touches on many things that are relevant to this moment that we're all living in right now. But it's also connected to the many moments in history that have come before today. I hope that you read it. I hope that you enjoy it. And if you want to order a copy, go to shoptyt.com. Thank you, be well, and happy 2021.
Here's the inside scoop on diners in LA. You want good pastrami sandwich, you go to Factors. You want to see some people in the business, you go to Nate and Al's. You want the best variety? My secret spot's the Nosh. Now here's the inside scoop on politics and news. You go watch the Young Turks live every day at 6 o'clock Eastern.
All right, welcome back. Always good to be with you. I have a few comments. I need to get through them quickly. I will read as many as I can. $2 thank you for that. Says, Doc, let me sell for you one day when you're raw so I can get to co-host with intelligent, beautiful Senator Nina Turner. Sound like an applicant, Senator.
I love it.
7477777. Thank you for that. Says the justice system is completely broken for disenfranchised citizens. The prison industrial complex profits by incarcerating citizens unlawfully. Yeah, and they make money on everything. Commissary, phone calls, everything. Everything is a money grab. All right. It's a self-sustaining ecosystem on the backs of poor people. Okay. A Black student racially abused and gets suspended after being abused. Yep. Let's go to it. Here it is.
Recently, during an athletic event, racial language was directed toward my son. Instead of the behavior being directly addressed, teams were instructed to only speak to their teammates the rest of their game. The behavior continued, no protections were put into place, and ultimately my son was removed from the game for his adverse response to racial harassment. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated event or experience for my family. On multiple occasions, I had to repeatedly advocate for accommodations and safety measures to protect my son. In many cases, those protections were only implemented after escalation beyond school leadership and after I personally suggested these solutions. When racial harassment is minimized or addressed inconsistently, it sends a message to students about what behavior is tolerated and whose experiences are taken seriously. Leadership responses shape school culture, and students are always watching how adults respond in moments like this. At this time, my confidence in the district's ability to consistently protect my child has been deeply shaken. And I know my family is not the only one that has felt this way.
It's sad that she has to go through all of this for a simple remedy that should be readily available to every professional who has charge over young folk. Put it up full mass. We have some background information. You're looking at Tiana Morton, the mother of a Virginia high schooler. She's demanding answers and accountability from the school board after her son was called a racial slur during a basketball game, but was ejected from the game while the other players were allowed to stay on the court. Ms. Morton says her son is a sophomore who plays on the junior varsity basketball team at Great Bridge High School in Chesapeake. During a basketball matchup, according to the narrative, against the Hickory High School team, she says racially insensitive language was used throughout the game by the opposing players. Quote, a few of the teammates on the bench, on Hickory's bench, are the ones that yelled, "It's not a foul, you dumb N-word, stop crying," end quote, is what they said, Morton told WVEC News. Video footage captured the incident. Morton is heard shouting criticism at the referees and coaches after one Hickory player called her son a slur. Quote, he just called him the N-word. Are you serious? Morton yelled. The footage also shows her son reacting by trying to confront the offending player. Referees had to intervene to break up both teams with tensions flared, and Morton's son was then booted from the game for being called the N-word. Morton said no consequences were issued to any of the other players, and they were allowed to play. She also recalled trying to walk across the court to her son after he was benched, but was stopped by security. Quote, but the male police officer did stop me and say there was no law against the word, end quote. Morton told Waving. After the incident, Morton said her son was suspended for his reaction. She immediately contacted the principal of Hickory High School for answers. The principal confirmed that multiple student players used racially offensive language that night of the game, but did not release details of their identities or whether they face any disciplinary action. The school system released a statement. I will read it in full. Chesapeake Public Schools is aware of the concerns that have been raised regarding Friday's basketball game. We take all reports involving student conduct, including allegations of inappropriate or discriminatory language, seriously. Because this matter involves students, we are unable to comment on specific individuals or potential disciplinary actions. There are clear procedures in place for reviewing concerns at the school level and in coordination with VHSL. We are committed to ensuring that all school-sponsored events provide a safe and respectful environment for students, staff, and spectators. It's a bunch of bull. During a school board meeting on the 9th of February, Ms. Morton, the mother, recounted the moments that her son was placed on the sidelines after the incident. Morton did receive an apology from the school division officials, but said the incident has impacted her son and her son's self-esteem. Quote, he's explained that it's made him, question all these situations, have made him question who he is, and is he what they all have said true? Or just all these different remarks that they've made to him throughout his season. Morton said, so I think it's kind of shaking him a bit. And he did say that this situation, specifically hearing the Hickory parents cheer as he was being escorted off the court after going through what he went through, he said it really hurt his feelings. Of course it did. Of course it did. The subconscious mind is not aware of context. The conscious mind is. So the more he hears these words, the more he internalizes the non-contextual dynamic of that word. And he's a child. The best thing you can do, in my opinion, to the mother, and I'm not telling you how to parent, it's a difficult situation and I get it. We've reported on a lot of these stories here at Indisputable. If that environment doesn't change, he has to change from that environment. For his sake. For his sake. All right, Senator, thoughts?
Yeah, that's great advice, Doc. And again, this, more things change, the more they stay the same. I mean, it's making me think about the Little Rock Nine, total different circumstance. Now, I would preface that historic moment with saying it's not exactly the same, but the subconscious, the psyche that goes into people yelling those kind of racial epithets at you and making you doubt, who you really are. We know that there's science out there that says that even the brain development is not until really the age of 25. And you put this kind of pressure, he's trying to play basketball and this kind of pressure on him. And shame on those adults who cheered when he was led off the court. They wanted him. They just like those people that were outside standing yelling, at the black students who were trying to desegregate those schools. Them the same ones, just the 2026 version of that. So your advice to the mother, she has to protect her son at all costs. And the district needs to do more than put out these flimsy, that was one of them standard statements.
Yep,
Understand it, but what you gonna do to make sure that this mother and her son, to mitigate the damage, because you can't change what happened, but they have an obligation to mitigate the damage and to try to ensure that this doesn't happen to anybody else's child.
That's
2026, Doc. Every time I think that the younger generation is gonna have a breakthrough on this kind of stuff, we are reminded that this kind of bigotry and anti-Blackness is taught and it's carried on generation after generation. That's the one thing this country ain't been able to shake. Because you got these kids are well under the age of 18. And they know how to use the N-word, though, against a black person in that way. Think about that.
Right. And it's not even treated as profanity as you would treat any other profane word being uttered by a minor at a school event. They would be disciplined for the use of profanity and also bullying. They would be disciplined for bullying. But when it happens to be a racial slur, somehow immunity
towards us, though.
Yeah, towards black folk.
People.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well said. Always fascinating, Senator, to have you on the program. Tell people how they can follow you. Check out your great work.
Well, great to be with you, Doc, and the entire Indisputable family. Nina Turner on Twitter, Nina Turner Ohio on the gram. And tonight, Doc, I'm having a teach-in so people can go to wearesomebody.org. That is wearesomebody.org. And one Pastor Michael McBride is going to join me tonight in a virtual teach-in from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you don't even have to leave the comfort of wherever you are.
Love it.
If you're blessed enough to be in comfort. So join us. Go to wearesomebody.org.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. I'm sure it's going to be great. And thank you for all your leadership this sister.
Thank you, Doc.
Remember, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Take care of the planet. Remember, the truth is always indisputable.